Tails.
Heads.
I'm going to speak last.
Okay. Okay. Governor McCarthy. Oh, opening statements, please.
Governor Doherty, good to see you this morning. People, thank you for coming here. I look forward to our discussion. I just want to stress that the faith I have in our candidate, Senator Alfred Russo, goes across the board. He has the experience both in the Senate and the military that it requires to lead this nation. He will restore this country to the greatness that it is known in the face of an administration that has failed on so many issues. Our plan to take this country to where it deserves to be, both in terms of our reputation abroad, our stability abroad, and our stability at home and at the border. Senator Russo will be able to construct a nation that really takes care of our citizens and also is a leader in the world.
Governor Doherty, opening statement.
Thank you, moderator, and thank you to Nick for coming out today. Thank you for everyone here. So I think that Tamisha is the right person to lead America. I think that she has, number one, the qualifications, number two, the ideas, and number three, the right people behind her to make her administration one that is going to take America in the right direction. So Tamisha, in the first debate, told you a lot about the substantive policies that she's going to do to improve America. She talked about changing and revamping our healthcare system, making sure that Obamacare is implemented properly to the full extent of the law, and even expanding on Obamacare to make sure that all Americans have free and affordable healthcare. We understand that that's not going to be easy, but Tamisha doesn't support the policies simply because they are easy, or simply because the House or the Senate are more likely to pass them. Tamisha supports policies that the American people want, and that will actually change the tenor of our lifestyle in America. We think, and I think, that Tamisha has the qualifications, has the experience, and has, I think, a very important and diverse lens to the life experience in America. She didn't grow up with all the same advantages that I had, that Nick had, or Alfred had. She grew up in Houston. She grew up as a black woman. We think that these are experiences that are different and necessary for the American people, and we think that she can offer a unique lens when talking about policy, when connecting with voters, and with displaying her message to everyone in the country. That's why I'm proud to be her running mate for president. And when she asked me to be her running mate, I didn't even hesitate. I've known Tamisha for the better part of a decade now. We both are public servants. We both believe in the power of the federal government. We work within the federal government to make the federal government better. We don't work within the federal government to complain about the federal government. We think that the federal government is the arbiter that can take this country in the right direction. It means that everyone in the country can be treated equally. It means that everyone in the country can follow the same laws, enjoy the same regulations, and not be at the whim of local leaders or constituencies that may not support everyone in their full equality. That's why I'm proud to be Tamisha's running mate for president, and I'm certainly looking forward to the rest of this debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. So starting with Governor McCarthy, you claimed that you and your running mate will stem the tide of Islamic extremism and ensure peace and stability through strength. What are your plans to halt Islamic extremists such as ISIS?
Great, thank you for the question, I appreciate it. So we need to, obviously, there's this issue that's been going on for so long. We need to develop a system in our military that protects our citizens at home and also protects the citizens of this world. I think when Governor Doherty talks about experience, when you talk about military issues and you want to talk about experience, the man I believe in is Senator Alfred Russo. Senator Russo has a storied career in the military. He has a storied career in our Senate of providing excellent policies for foreign policy. He understands what it's like to be on the ground in these nations fighting. because he's been there, because he understands the way that this works. When you look at Senator Edwards as a leader and you think about her policies regarding the military, they don't come from somewhere, they don't come from a place of understanding or empathy towards the actual situation. They come from a politicized narrative. When you look at the way that Senator Alfred Russo will lead this nation and the way that his military experience will guide our military going forward, I have utmost faith in his ability to curate a system of policies and to lead a nation and an administration that takes care of our citizens and establishes stability and transparency abroad.
Thank you, Governor. Governor Doherty, your response?
So what I think is really important with obviously the worsening crisis in the Middle East with ISIS is that we need to actually do something about the crisis while not actively harming America's ability to keep its troops safe and to keep its citizens safe throughout the world. What I think that we, and what Tanisha thinks that we need to do is to, number one, support the groups in Iraq that want our support. That if the Kurds in Iraq want our support for bombing campaigns in order to keep their citizens safe, in order to keep Baghdad safe by not allowing dams to be blown up, for example, we're going to support the actions that have already been taken by the Obama administration, and we're willing to do that. We also don't think, however, that getting involved in Syria with troops on the ground or with support against ISIS in Syria is necessarily a good option because of the, number one, the way that the people in Syria have responded to US action in the past, and number two, the actions that countries like Saudi Arabia and Turkey have taken within their own region to help and try and stabilize the situation within Syria. We think that America can be a nation where it is a leader in foreign policy, but it isn't the buck stops here. The buck doesn't stop here in America. It certainly doesn't in the Middle East. We're not from the Middle East. We don't share the same values as many Middle Eastern countries. We simply don't have the same political calculus as these countries. So I think what's very important for us to recognize is that we should be able to help where help is specifically needed and wanted, and that we should allow others to help where help is going to be more beneficial for them, and not necessarily putting America at the forefront of everything. We've already seen the problems that come along with an invasion of Iraq. We don't want to go down that road again.
Thank you, Governor. Governor McCarthy, your rebuttal?
It's very interesting that Governor Doherty talks about the experiences of failure in Syria and in other places in the Middle East. When we have a candidate who is going to repeat these mistakes and offer up the same policies that have led us to where we are today, versus a candidate who understands the military and who has been a leader in the military, I think it's clear the choice needs to be Senator Alfred Russo.
Thank you.
Governor Doherty, according to the survey conducted by Sociology Capstone Seminar, participants noted that Edwards lacked authority on foreign policy. Is she really ready to lead the free world?
So I think that there's a difference between being a foreign policy expert and being a capable leader. I think that, yes, and Senator Edwards and I, we do have experience in foreign policy. We're not diplomats. We didn't spend our entire lives abroad. Neither did Alfred Russo, neither did Nick McCarthy. I don't think anyone can get up here and claim authority on diplomatic issues. So I think what we're going to do is, number one, put a team of people that are going to actively be able to assess the situation in countries like Syria, in countries like Mali, when violence erupts and when things go poorly. I don't think that the two of us can sit here and tell you what's going to happen in the world in the next 5 years. But there are a lot of smart people within the State Department and within our government who can. I don't think necessarily, simply because Tanisha is not a diplomat, Tanisha didn't serve in the military, doesn't make Tanisha any better or worse of a candidate in foreign policy. I think that if you're going to look at foreign policy baggage, look at Senator Russo's record of leaving the military just days before the invasion of Iraq in 2003. I think that being part of that operation, being part of the buildup, the invasion of Afghanistan, was a monumental disaster for our country, resulted in thousands of American lives lost and millions impacted throughout the world. And I don't think you can simply say, just because I served in the military, I have the authority to make all of the decisions about foreign policy, and that simply someone who, mind you, has been serving in the federal government for the better part of a decade doesn't have any experience doing this.
Governor McCarthy?
Yeah, unfortunately, we've reached the first point in the debate where Governor Doherty will try to grossly mislead the American public. When he discusses Senator Alfred Russo leaving the military to enter life as a public servant in our nation, he's missing the point drastically. When Senator Alfred Russo made that calculated transition, his main goal and his clear objective was to lead this country from a place of power within the Senate, from leadership, and from an understanding of the way that the policies of our Senate and of our federal government affect the men and the women on the ground in these nations. It's interesting that you say that it doesn't really matter that she's not a diplomat, that she doesn't have foreign policy experience, and you seem to freely promote that fact. Largely the same thing was said in 2008 and 2012 in the debates. It was a clear, especially in 2008, decision between someone who lacked foreign policy experience and was quote unquote, an effectual leader and didn't need the foreign policy experience because they were this leader. I think when you look at where we are now with all these crises, it is clear that you must understand that the leader that was chosen in 2008 did not lead us to a place of power because he did not have foreign policy experience. When you look at foreign policy experience, military experience, it is clear that the choice must be Senator Alfred Russo. We can't wait until violence erupts in these nations, as you said. We have to be able to instill stability abroad across the board at all times.
Governor Doherty, first one.
So I think this exceptional American attitude where if what we want to do is right, what we're going to do in all cases is best, is simply not true in a lot of these instances. Just because Barack Obama was not a diplomat didn't lead to the Arab Spring. It didn't lead to instability in Egypt. These are things that are independent of American aggression or instability, or things that happened decades prior. So I don't think you can simply say that because Tamisha Edwards isn't a diplomat, that there's going to be bad things happening throughout the world, or good things happening throughout the world, for that matter.
So moving on, Governor McCarthy, according to the Immigration Policy Center, roughly 1 million immigrants enter the country each year as lawful permanent residents, but 4.6 million more still have applications pending. The number of new immigrants admitted each year is based on numbers set by Congress in 1990. Some argue that those standards do not reflect the modern demands for family unification and the workforce needs of today. What will your administration do to address the surge of undocumented immigrants entering America?
So when we talk about leaders not causing things, such as the Arab Spring, when a leader has policies that lead to something or that allow something to end up in a devastating crisis, as we see in the humanitarian crisis on our border, as we saw in Arab Spring, we need to choose other leaders that won't allow it to get to that point and will protect both the people in our country and those that are trying to enter our country. As someone from Texas, I've seen these people, these immigrants, who are such incredible examples of what America could be, that are trying to enter our nation and adopt our country. In many cases, they deserve to be adopted. We need to create a system that is that takes care of these people, right? So naive policy leads to immigrants that fall through the cracks of our system. If we allow people to enter our country and can't provide for them and can't be responsible enough to develop immigration policies that keep them with their families, that provide infrastructure that is necessary, it leads to a humanitarian crisis. If you want to be humanitarian about immigration policy, you need to understand that we can't accept immigrants into our nation illegally when we can't provide for them. If we don't develop infrastructure that allows them to pursue everything that Americans ought to be able to pursue, their inalienable rights, then we're not providing for them and we're not doing them any service.
Thank you. Governor Doherty?
Can you repeat that question? I want to make sure I answer
Sure.
every part of it.
According to the Immigration Policy Center, roughly 1 million immigrants enter the country each year as lawful permanent residents, but 4.6 million still have applications pending. The number of new immigrants admitted each year is based on numbers set by Congress in 1990. Some argue that those standards do not reflect the modern demands for family unification in the workforce of today. What will your administration do to address the surge of undocumented immigrants entering America?
Well, I think the example of Congress setting these standards in 1990 and not changing them is something that shows that Congress isn't willing to take this issue on with the levity and with the seriousness that it deserves. We think that simply criticizing policy coming from the Oval Office or criticizing policy coming from the Senate is not the way that Congress should work. And that Congress should work to promote solutions for our immigration crisis. So what we say, and I hope Nick responds to this in his rebuttal, is that we support the DREAM Act. I'd like to hear how the Republicans feel about the DREAM Act. We didn't actually hear that during the last debate. And I think that we have seen that the DREAM Act is going to be a piece of legislation that is helpful for the vast majority of immigrants because it doesn't penalize those who have been here for a long time, who decided to get educated, who in some cases joined our armed forces or are trying to join our armed forces to serve our country. I think that it's very interesting that we want to make sure that America can be a place where everyone is welcome, yet the policies that Nick has enacted as governor of Texas have kind of been antithetical to that, where he's promoted and been actively seeking to build a bigger fence, to build a wider moat, where we don't think we should be doing that. We should be building a better bridge to America. We should be making sure that individuals who want to come to our country are able to do so, number one, legally, but number two, that legal path isn't at a level where it takes 10 years for someone to become a legal resident or citizen of America if they're not a doctor or not a banker. We think that our side, and Tamisha, gives a better substantive policy by supporting the DREAM Act and by changing the perception of immigrants who decide to come to this country. We shouldn't adopt those xenophobic policies or those xenophobic attitudes and rhetoric that have been the capstone of America for centuries, going back to the Irish or going back to Italian immigration, and we want to change that.
Thank you. Governor McCarthy?
Absolutely. So when you address the common sense policies that Senator Russo has suggested, such as increasing the size of our fence, that is to deter illegal entrance into this country. I am all for legal entrance into this country. When you allow immigrants to immigrate illegally when we can't provide for them, that's not xenophobic, that's anti-humanitarian. If we can't provide for these people that deserve to be in our country, we can't provide for them.
Thank you.
So do you support the DREAM Act?
Yes, I do. Senator Russo does. Thank you for the question.
Governor Doherty, you and Edwards plan to fight and expand healthcare so that everyone can have access. What changes, if any, do you plan on making to Obamacare?
So I think what's important to note about this question is we like the idea of Obamacare. We think it's a step in the right direction. We think there's a couple of things that we would like to change about Obamacare. The first is making sure that things like the employer mandate and individual mandate are actually implemented so that small business owners and people who can't afford insurance are able to do so. I think that those are two very fundamentally important things that we want to see happen. And we've been disappointed with the Republican House of Representatives over the past 2 years simply voting umpteenth times to get rid of Obamacare rather than working towards viable solutions on health care for the American people. We're actually giving a viable solution in addition to Obamacare. So we're giving you two solutions, Tanisha and I. We're saying that we should implement a national health care system that is going to be able to provide a public option for those who want it. We think that it's imperative that every American has access to health care because you can't access your right to anything else if you are not healthy. We have seen so many times where the government is not able to provide for citizens, where the government simply leaves citizens with substandard care, leaves them waiting at the emergency room door if they don't have the posh insurance policies of another person who walks through. That shouldn't be the case in America. We're a better country than that. And Tamisha and I think that we can lead the country to a better future and make everyone safer and healthier by enacting a more comprehensive healthcare plan.
Governor.
Yeah, so you talk about leaving citizens with unsatisfactory care. Absolutely, that is what the policies of the current administration have done. We currently are in discussions, obviously, on how to shape our healthcare policies of our nation, but it's not acceptable to leave them with a sub-satisfactory system that clearly is not. The dissatisfaction expressed throughout this nation when Obamacare was rolled out was incredibly devastating. I mean, the failure of the Obamacare rollout in so many different levels at so many different points throughout the rollout really spoke to the dissatisfaction in our nation of the citizenship in addressing the healthcare crisis in this country. So when you talk about getting everyone covered and you talk about getting healthcare for everyone, absolutely. We need to be better about providing healthcare and health insurance for people with pre-existing conditions. We need to enact policies that are both affordable and satisfactory in their care. When we provide a system that leaves such a great majority dissatisfied with the healthcare and health system that they have opted into, and in many cases been forced to opt into, that's not a good system. That's not what we need to expect from our federal government. These failures at so many various points throughout the past several years in addressing the healthcare issue on the part of the Democrats that you guys represent, I think is something that we need to avoid, and Senator Russo would avoid those healthcare policies.
Thank you. Governor Doherty?
So Nick's right about one thing. Obamacare wasn't implemented perfectly or even ideally. We haven't contested that. What we say, from Tamisha and I, is that healthcare is a fundamental right for everyone. And that's simply because you walk through the door with a substandard health insurance plan or no health insurance, that you shouldn't be subject to inferior medical care. We've given a clear, even though Obamacare hasn't been implemented well, there's still been millions of people who have been able to get health insurance, and we want to make sure that millions more get health insurance.
Thank you. Governor McCarthy, according to a survey conducted by the Sociology Capstone Seminar, some voters describe Senator Russo as, quote, aggressive and stubborn. After the first presidential debate, as his running mate, how do you respond to these accusations?
I would say that Senator Russo is deliberately aggressive in many cases. He has sound ideology and sound policies that he works to promote both in the Senate and in the military through his experience there and his channels that he's developed in the military. So when you talk about aggressive, I don't think it's an aggressive assertion. I think it's an aggressive pursuit, where the means certainly are justified by the ends of his policies. And when he works to promote these policies in our country and he comes off as assertive, that's not because he wants to implement these things upon you. It's because he wants to have a discussion with the populace and support these policies that he believes are so sound, that I believe are so sound, that so much of this country believes are the policies that need to be enacted moving forward. When you talk about getting more Americans insured, absolutely we agree when we're discussing healthcare. We need to do that. So when Senator Russo sees the failures of the current administration to do things like that, he will be aggressive in his pursuit of rectifying the failures that have been going on in our federal government for so long.
Thank you. Governor Doherty?
So I think it's interesting that Senator Russo is seen as aggressive when we haven't heard of substantive policies to deal with our healthcare issues from the Republican Party. We tell you two things. We tell you, number one, we're going to expand Obamacare. We're going to make sure that everyone has greater access to Obamacare and that low-income individuals are able to get this health care in a way that is going to be better than what has happened in the past 2 years. We also tell you that we're going to ideally promote a system where everyone can buy and receive free or extremely low-cost health insurance from the government. We don't see how every other developed Western country can have a healthcare system that supports all of its citizens, yet America can't. We do think America is great. We think America can provide this. We don't think it's going to be easy. We don't think it might not be the most politically feasible thing for Tamisha to do. But Tamisha doesn't do things to pass policy. Tamisha doesn't do things that are going to be like insatiable to Republican obstructionist legislatures like Senator Russo, who's done nothing. He talks about serving the federal government, yet he criticizes the federal government throughout all of his policies. Tamisha and I are proud servants of the federal government. We believe in the power of the federal government. We believe in the power of the government to do things like promote health care, to keep citizens safe, to make sure that all immigrants are given their fair shake and aren't actually being turned away at the border or being subject to racist policies or being subject to discriminatory policies. We think that that's something that's fundamentally different. And whether I think Alfred's personality, I don't think is what the really important question is. It's what Alfred's policies are, and we haven't heard what those are.
Thank you. Governor McCarthy?
So once again, Governor Russo is trying to drive an artificial wedge between me and him, our ideologies. We both obviously agree that we need to support the rights of the people in this country. We both obviously agree that we need to provide health care for more people in this country. When they talk about their belief and their trust in the federal government, they want to expand a federal government that has at so many times mishandled things. You might want to read the Constitution where there's powers afforded to the states, enumerated.
Thank you, Governor.
There's a difference between federal rights and state
up.
rights.
Thank you.
Sure.
Governor Doherty, if Ebola reached the level of an epidemic in the United States, what would be your course of action?
So I think this question is a bit of a non sequitur because I don't think it's going to be an epidemic in the United States. We have the most developed healthcare institutions in the world to deal with public health crises such as this. We have the CDC, we have the WHO that's doing a great job on the international scale of making sure that Ebola doesn't reach beyond Guinea, reach beyond Liberia, and reach beyond Sierra Leone, the 3 countries that are experiencing this epidemic right now. We've seen that countries like Nigeria, countries like Ghana, have been able to eradicate Ebola within their borders. So I don't think that it's necessarily something that, and by acknowledging this question, I don't want to do that because I don't want to play into the public fear and sentiments that Ebola is the #1 threat to our country and that Ebola is going to lead to everyone dying and being unsafe. We think that, and I think that this is part of the problem, and I think Tamisha is probably better to speak on this than I am, but that the perceptions of Africa, the perceptions of African countries and Africans through policies like shutting down international travel for Ebola patients are not something that our administration wants to promote, are not something that our administration supports, because we live in a world where everyone matters, not just American citizens, not just Liberian citizens, not just those who are rich and wealthy. We live in a world where everyone should be a priority. What we say on our side is that Tamisha and I are proud to support common sense public health measures to contain the spread of Ebola, to make sure that it doesn't reach the epidemic level. I don't think we've seen any indication in the United States that it's going to reach that level, but I don't think that we've seen from Senator Russo and Governor McCarthy that they have any plan other than shutting our borders down and actively harming our ability on the world stage to be seen as a trade partner and as a viable ally.
So here's the thing, Ebola doesn't see race. Ebola doesn't see class. Ebola is not an African problem, it's a world problem. It is a threat to us all. One case of Ebola in this nation constitutes an outbreak. That is unacceptable. We have a disease that has been brought into our country that could potentially become an epidemic. I mean, that's a fact. And you talk about trusting the CDC. The CDC has failed to inform the public of the realities of the situation time and time again. Another example of how agencies within the federal government cannot necessarily be trusted to provide accurate information, to provide legitimate leadership, to enact policies that will take care of us on our soil. When you talk about common sense policies, such as shutting our border, which is just gross hyperbole, our policy would be to not to promote a travel ban on West African passports. There's no direct flights from West Africa into our country, so it's not shutting our borders in any way. I mean, that's ridiculous politicization of this issue. It is, we would allow healthcare workers and American citizens to return to our country after careful monitoring within our nation of 3 weeks, which has been suggested. We would also bring these infected citizens to the best health care that they can get in regional hospitals throughout the nation. We cannot trust, unfortunately, a medical staff that has not been trained to treat Ebola, especially when it is such a devastating disease. If they have not been trained, they should not have the ability to, or the responsibility of containing or treating these victims.
Thank you.
So I would like to hear from Governor McCarthy what the CDC has done to lie to the American people. They've told everyone and enumerated every single case of Ebola that has happened within our borders. They've told everyone about the public health threats and why this isn't an epidemic, why this isn't an outbreak that is going to lead to the deaths of thousands or millions of Americans. And I would like to hear Nick McCarthy's response to why the federal government on this issue should not be trusted, just like every other issue, apparently the federal government shouldn't be trusted.
So it's not an issue of trust, it's an issue of ability. So the CDC in their reporting has, at several junctures, retracted statements, altered statements, and in leading to this, this issue of a crisis of confidence within our nation in terms of the healthcare service that is being provided, to lead to that crisis of confidence is a failure within its own right.
Great, thank you, Beth.
Governor McCarthy, your closing statement, please.
Yes. So I think it's really important that we have transparent conversations. When we have issues like we spoke on tonight that are of such grave importance, and we have artificial wedges that are driven between me and Governor Dougherty, it misleads the public. We want to support a healthcare system in our country that provides healthcare to all of our citizens. We want to take care of our own. We will take care of our own. We want to open our borders to immigrants who deserve to be here and who will promote our nation and the values that we support and hold so dearly to our own selves. We believe that Senator Russo's policies accomplishes all these things. They are not naive. They are sound. They are based in fact. They are not overly ideological. They are practical measures that will be implemented in our country moving forward that will bring us to a more prosperous future. Under Senator Russo's leadership, based on his experience in the Senate and the military, he will be able to lead us to a point both abroad and at home that Americans deserve. We deserve to be proud of our country. We deserve to understand that our federal government, our state government, and our citizens are upholding the values that we hold so dearly and have for so long. Our party and our leader will do that for the American people moving forward. His experience and his leadership is the clear choice over Senator Edwards' inadequacies and inexperience.
Thank you. Governor Dougherty?
So we hear a lot of nice rhetoric from Governor McCarthy. We don't hear is substantive policies that are going to make the American people better. I've given you lots of them throughout the debate today. I've told you how we're going to have a two-pronged attack to our healthcare crisis within our country. I've told you that we're going to make sure that Ebola and other serious health problems are contacted and are taken into consideration by the CDC and swiftly dealt with. I think that by saying that the CDC is inadequate is a disservice to those men and women who risk their lives and risk their time and talents to do something for the altruistic benefit of everyone living within this country. I also think that on top of the healthcare law that Governor Russo, or Senator Russo in his last debate, didn't talk or said that healthcare and women's choice was a personal issue. We don't think that the choice for a woman, the choice for a man to receive adequate health care, to receive adequate birth control, to get a surgery or a procedure done that is necessary for their health is a personal choice. This is a choice that the government actually should be involved with, that we should make sure that the government is able to facilitate those who otherwise would have no choice. They would have the choice of not being able to afford their birth control pills that they need on a daily basis. They would have the choice of not being able to afford that hip replacement surgery that vastly improves their quality of life. We also think that it's not up to America to solve every single problem in our world today. We think that America can be a sound arbiter and can be a sound voice in many of these issues, but is not the person to go in guns blazing saying this is what we're doing and we're not going to take into consideration other people's thoughts and wishes. I think it's very clear the policies that that Tamisha and I have towards Syria and towards ISIS and what we plan to do versus the platitudes that we hear from Governor McCarthy. So I thank everyone for coming to this debate, and I'm really glad that we had this discussion.
Thank you. Thank you to both candidates.
That concludes our debate today from Bates College. Thank you, Governor McCarthy and Governor Darcy. A special thank you to our audience. The next campaign event is the Town Hall debate, which will take place on Friday, October 31st. Thank you. Look forward to seeing you there.
On my birthday.